They mocked the royal guard at the firing range, cracking jokes and calling him a show-off who probably saluted his bullets before firing. But the moment he rolled up his sleeve to adjust his gear, and that black mark on his forearm came into view, everything stopped. The SEAL commander froze mid-step. That wasn't just a tattoo, it was a symbol that couldn't be bought, faked, or earned through ordinary means. It came from a place that officially doesn't exist, and it revealed that this so-called ceremonial guard had a past far beyond anyone's expectations. Want to know what that mark really meant and why the entire range fell into stunned silence? The second they saw it, hit that subscribe button, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Here's what really happened. Dawn was breaking over the Quantico firing range when the first transport vehicles rolled through the gates. Virginia's morning air carried the scent of gun oil and anticipation as Navy SEALs in black tactical gear assembled their equipment with practiced efficiency. The range stretched before them like a proving ground, dotted with targets and obstacles that would test even the most elite warriors. The second convoy arrived 30 minutes later, and everything changed. British soldiers in brilliant scarlet uniforms emerged from their vehicles, their ceremonial dress a shocking contrast to the utilitarian environment around them. The Americans stopped what they were doing, some laughing openly at what appeared to be an elaborate joke. Palace guards at a combat training facility seemed as out of place as peacocks in a war zone. Among the British contingent, Sergeant Michael Harrow moved with quiet authority. His ceremonial uniform was immaculate, every button and buckle positioned with mathematical precision. The white gloves covering his hands were spotless, concealing old scars that told stories no one present could guess. While his fellow guards maintained their traditional stoic demeanor, Harrow's eyes swept the range with the calculated assessment of someone who had seen death up close. Lieutenant Jake Malone couldn't resist the opportunity for entertainment. His voice carried across the morning stillness with casual cruelty. "Look what Santa brought us. Boys, the Queen's own toy soldiers, complete with pretty red coats." His teammates chuckled appreciatively, adjusting their gear with the swagger of men who had earned their reputation in the world's most unforgiving places. None of them noticed the way Harrow's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly at the mockery. The British soldiers began their equipment checks in silence, following Harrow's lead and ignoring the American taunts. But there was something different about the way the sergeant handled his L-85 rifle. His movements carried an economy of motion that spoke of muscle memory forged under fire, hands that knew weapons not as ceremonial props, but as instruments of survival. Commander David Bennett observed from a distance, his experienced eye noting details that escaped his men's attention. There was nothing ceremonial about the way that lead guard manipulated his weapon. The fluid movements, the unconscious tactical positioning, the way his eyes never stopped scanning, these were behaviors learned in places where complacency meant death. Bennett had spent enough years in combat zones to recognize a kindred spirit, regardless of uniform color. Without warning, memory struck Harrow like a physical blow. The weight of the rifle triggered flashbacks to Baghdad streets in 2009, where the same hands now adjusting ceremonial equipment had once planted explosive charges on insurgent strongholds. The contrast between past and present was jarring. Then he had moved through hostile territory, under cover of darkness. Now he stood in morning sunlight wearing a uniform designed to be seen from 100 yards away. The range master's voice cut through the gathering tension with professional authority. "Gentlemen, today's exercise will test combat marksmanship under stress. First drill involves hostage rescue scenarios at extended range with moving targets. SEAL team, you're first up." The Americans stepped forward with confident precision, their movements choreographed by countless hours of training and real-world application. Malone's squad executed their run with textbook efficiency. Their shots were clean, their coordination flawless, their times impressive by any military standard. Watching from the sidelines, the British guards remained expressionless, showing neither approval nor criticism of the demonstration. But Harrow tracked every movement with the automatic analysis of a professional, cataloging techniques and noting tactical decisions with practiced ease. When the SEALs completed their course, satisfied murmurs rippled through the assembled observers. These were times that would have impressed special forces units worldwide, the kind of performance that justified the SEALs' legendary reputation. Malone holstered his sidearm with theatrical flair, turning toward the ceremonial guards with undisguised contempt. "Your turn, Palace boys. Try not to embarrass yourselves too badly." Then Harrow stepped to the firing line, and the world shifted on its axis. His opening shots rang out with metronomic precision, each round finding its mark with mechanical certainty. But it wasn't just accuracy that caught every observer's attention, it was the speed, the fluidity, the way he transitioned between targets as if following a predetermined script, written in his muscle memory. When magazine changes came, he executed them blindfolded, his hands moving with the kind of automatic responses that only developed after thousands of repetitions under extreme duress. The American chatter died instantly. This wasn't range shooting, this was something else entirely. Something that spoke of places where missing meant dying and second chances didn't exist. Bennett watched with growing recognition, puzzle pieces shifting in his mind as impossible possibilities began to take shape. During the obstacle portion, Harrow flowed through barriers like liquid mercury, his ceremonial uniform somehow never impeding his progress. He moved with predatory grace, selecting pots with mathematical efficiency, his timing perfect down to split seconds. The other guards were skilled, but their sergeant operated on a completely different level, a level that suggested training, far beyond anything ceremonial units typically received. It happened during a particularly complex sequence involving multiple elevation changes. Harrow's sleeve shifted as he vaulted over a barrier, revealing just a glimpse of faded ink on his forearm. Most observers missed it, focused as they were on his impossible performance, but Bennett saw it clearly, a dagger and crescent moon, so weathered it was barely visible, but unmistakable to someone who knew its significance. Bennett's coffee mug slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers, shattering on concrete with a sharp crack that seemed to echo across the now silent range. All eyes turned to the SEAL commander, whose face had drained of color as he stared at the British sergeant with dawning comprehension. His subordinates had never seen their unflappable leader lose composure like this, and confusion rippled through their ranks. Harrow completed the course with a time that obliterated every previous record, but he showed no acknowledgement of the achievement. He simply returned to formation with his fellow guards, breathing barely elevated despite the physical demands, expression unchanged as if he had merely completed routine morning exercises. But Bennett couldn't look away. The tattoo had unlocked a flood of memories from Iraq in 2011, from the operation that had gone catastrophically wrong and the safe house that had collapsed with his entire team trapped inside. He remembered the impossible rescue, the mysterious British operative who had materialized from nowhere like an avenging angel, moving through rubble and enemy fire, with superhuman skill to pull wounded SEALs to safety. Post-exercise procedures felt surreal as Bennett made excuses to linger, waiting for the right moment to approach the British sergeant. He needed confirmation of what his instincts were screaming, needed to know if the impossible connection was real. The tattoo was extraordinarily rare. Fewer than 50 people worldwide carried the mark that identified members of a joint task force so classified its very existence was compartmentalized above top secret. When opportunity finally presented itself, Bennett cornered Harrow near the equipment storage area, away from curious eyes and listening ears. His hands trembled slightly as he rolled up his own sleeve, revealing an identical tattoo, though his was darker and more recent. The dagger and crescent moon that marked survivors of Operation Nightfall, the mission that had forged unbreakable bonds between elite operators from both nations. Mosul, Bennett said, his voice thick with emotion barely held in check. 2011, the collapsed safehouse on Haifa Street, when that British operator pulled my entire team out of hell. He paused, struggling with the magnitude of recognition. That was you. Silence stretched between them like a taut wire, heavy with classified history and shared trauma. Around them, normal range activities continued, weapons being cleaned, equipment secured, casual conversation between warriors. But in their isolated bubble of recognition, time seemed frozen. Finally, Harrow spoke his first words of the entire day, delivered with the understated tone Bennett remembered from a lifetime ago. You look different without the beard, Commander. The simple statement carried layers of acknowledgement, confirmation, and the dry humor that had helped both men survive impossible circumstances. The impact on watching SEALs was immediate and devastating. They had spent the morning ridiculing what they perceived as ceremonial soldiers, only to discover they were in the presence of a living legend. Stories of the Mosul rescue circulated in whispered conversations throughout SEAL team ready rooms. Tales of the phantom British operative who had appeared like divine intervention. In their darkest moment, Malone felt his world tilt as comprehension dawned. He had taunted a man who had saved American lives, a warrior whose actions had earned him mythical status among special operations forces. The shame was crushing, made worse by the realization that his team had been completely outclassed by someone they had dismissed as a parade ground ornament. In a gesture that shocked every witness, Bennett snapped to rigid attention and rendered a precise salute to the British sergeant. Protocol didn't require it, regulations didn't demand it, but honor did. The salute represented recognition of a debt that transcended rank, nationality, and official procedure, acknowledgement of one warrior's sacrifice for another's survival. The moment hung suspended like a photograph, capturing the bridge between past and present, between classified operations and public ceremonies. Harrow returned the salute with equal precision, his movement carrying the weight of shared sacrifice and mutual respect. In that instant, the gap between their two worlds, shadow operations and ceremonial service, seemed to vanish completely. Word spread through both units like wildfire, transforming the entire atmosphere of the exercise. Americans who had begun the day with casual superiority now regarded their British counterparts with new eyes, wondering what other secrets lay hidden beneath scarlet wool and brass buttons. The guards maintained their professional bearing, but there was a subtle shift in their posture, quiet pride in their sergeant's recognition. As formal exercises concluded, Bennett found himself walking alongside Harrow toward the departure vehicles. Their conversation was sparse, conducted in the economical language of professionals who understood that some truths were better left unspoken. But beneath the surface pleasantries flowed deeper currents, ongoing dialogue between two men, forged by experiences that civilians could never comprehend. The tattoos fading, Bennett observed, glancing at Harrow's now concealed marking. All things fade eventually, Harrow replied, adjusting his sleeve. Perhaps that's as it should be. The philosophy embedded in those words spoke to their shared understanding, a world where glory was ephemeral, where the most significant actions were often those that would never receive public acknowledgement. They were warriors who had chosen duty over recognition, service over personal glory, understanding that true honor often remained invisible to those it protected. As they reached the transport area, Bennett made an unexpected decision. There's a position opening, he said quietly. Liaison work between our units, officially. You'd coordinate ceremonial protocols. The pause that followed was loaded with unspoken meaning. Unofficially, we could use someone with your particular expertise. Harrow considered the offer without visible reaction. The operational world was calling him back, offering return to shadows where his lethal skills could be fully utilized. But there was honor in his current position too, a different kind of service that carried its own rewards and responsibilities, that he had grown to appreciate. I'll give it consideration, sir, he replied, the response diplomatic but non-committal. It was the kind of answer that preserved options while making no immediate commitments, leaving doors open for future possibilities. The return journey to respective bases unfolded in contemplative silence, both teams processing the day's revelations according to their own perspectives. For the SEALs, it was a humbling reminder that elite warriors came in unexpected forms, that true capability couldn't be judged by surface appearances. For the guards, it was validation of their sergeant's leadership and confirmation of suspicions they had harbored, but never dared voice. Harrow sat in the transport's rear, his ceremonial uniform once again pristine, his expression revealing nothing of his internal processes. But his mind raced between two worlds that demanded different things from him. The structured pageantry of his current role provided a unique form of peace, a way to serve without the constant adrenaline and life-or-death decisions that had defined his previous career. Yet the encounter with Bennett had awakened dormant aspects of his identity, reminders of who he had been before ceremonies and traditions became his daily reality. The part of him that thrived on impossible missions, that found purpose in shadows where politicians never ventured and historians never recorded, remained a fundamental component of his character that no amount of ceremonial duty could completely suppress. Returning to Buckingham Palace felt almost dreamlike after the morning's events. The familiar routine of changing into dress uniform, preparing for afternoon duties, maintaining precise attention to every detail of appearance and protocol, all of it seemed somehow diminished in scope, less significant following his reconnection with operational memories. But as he assumed his post that afternoon, watching tourists pose for photographs and children point with wonder at his scarlet uniform, Harrow achieved a moment of clarity. This too was service, simply of a different nature. He was guardian of traditions stretching back centuries, living embodiment of values that transcended individual achievement or personal recognition. Bennett's evening text message was characteristically direct. Still, "You that beer." Langley knows how to reach us. It was simultaneously invitation and reminder, a door deliberately left ajar for whenever he might choose to walk through it. The world of shadows would always exist, waiting for warriors like him to return when circumstances demanded. Standing in his quarters that night, Harrow examined the faded tattoo in his mirror, tracing barely visible lines with one finger. It represented membership in an exclusive brotherhood, reminder of sacrifices made and debts owed across international boundaries. But it also symbolized choices, paths taken and abandoned, that defined any warrior's journey through life. The marking represented a crucial chapter that had shaped him profoundly, but it didn't define his complete story. He was more than the sum of classified missions, more than the phantom who had extracted American soldiers from collapsed buildings in distant war zones. He was also the ceremonial guard who protected tradition, the professional soldier who served with equal distinction in multiple capacities. Weeks following the Quantico incident brought subtle changes to daily palace routines. Harrow's fellow guards maintained their traditional respect, but now with added dimensions, understanding that their sergeant possessed experiences none of them could fully comprehend. The knowledge was never articulated directly, but manifested in how they sought his guidance, the extra attention they paid to his instructions. Word had spread through unofficial channels that existed between elite units regardless of nationality. Officers who had never heard Sergeant Michael Harrow's name suddenly knew his reputation, understood the story surrounding his service in locations that didn't officially exist on any map or government document. For Harrow himself, the most significant transformation was internal. Bennett's recognition had forced confrontation with questions he had avoided for years. What did it mean to be a warrior during peacetime? How did someone transition from operational shadows to ceremonial spotlight? Was it possible to serve with equal honor in fundamentally different roles? Answers emerged gradually through observation and reflection rather than sudden revelation. He studied faces of tourists who came to witness the changing of the guard, noticed wonder in children's eyes and respect in veterans' salutes. He began understanding that his current role was no less important than his previous one, simply different in scope and ultimate purpose. Ceremonial aspects of military service that he had once dismissed as mere pageantry now revealed deeper significance. The precise movements, attention to detail, unwavering dedication to tradition. These weren't empty gestures, but expressions of values that transcended individual service members. They were reminders of continuity, of institutions that endured beyond any single warrior's career. A month after Quantico, Harrow's commanding officer approached him with an unusual request. The American embassy was hosting a reception for visiting military attaches, and they had specifically requested his presence. It was presented as routine diplomatic courtesy, but Harrow understood the real motivation behind the invitation. The reception occupied an elegant ballroom filled with dress uniforms from a dozen nations. Harrow navigated the crowd with practiced ease, his scarlet uniform drawing respectful acknowledgement from officers who recognized reputation if not the individual. Conversations were polite and professional, the diplomatic small talk that maintained relationships between allied militaries. Near evening's end, Bennett approached, distinguished in his dress blues. Their subsequent conversation was carefully neutral, observed by too many ears to permit complete candor. But beneath surface pleasantries flowed deeper currents, ongoing dialogue between professionals who understood modern warfare's complexities. "I trust your current assignment proves rewarding," Bennett said, his tone modulated for public consumption. "Every form of service offers its own rewards." Harrow replied with equal diplomacy. "The challenge lies in finding excellence regardless of specific mission parameters." The exchange was brief but meaningful, professional acknowledgement that satisfied both participants. Bennett had received his answer. Harrow was content in his current position and not seeking return to operational status. For Harrow, it confirmed that his choice to remain with ceremonial duties was understood and respected by former colleagues. As the reception concluded, Harrow reflected on military service's nature and the various ways warriors could serve their nations. The special operations community would always hold special significance in his heart, but his current role offered different satisfactions, alternative methods of meaningful contribution to something larger than himself. Subsequent months brought new challenges and responsibilities. Harrow was selected for advanced ceremonial training, learning intricacies of state occasions and diplomatic protocols. The skills differed from those honed in combat zones, but required identical attention to detail. the same commitment to excellence that had defined his operational career. There were moments when his former life called to him news reports from distant conflicts, encrypted messages from teammates still active in special operations, the eternal pull of adrenaline and purpose that defined the warrior mindset. But each time, he discovered reasons to remain, to continue serving in his current capacity with growing satisfaction. Tourists who photographed him never suspected they were observing a living legend, a man whose actions had preserved American lives and influenced classified mission outcomes. Children who waved from behind palace gates had no conception that his steady presence represented not just tradition, but ongoing vigilance of warriors who served in numerous different capacities. One autumn evening, standing guard duty outside Buckingham Palace, Harrow contemplated the journey that had brought him to this point. The scarlet uniform that had once felt like theatrical costume now felt like natural extension of himself, as much part of his identity as the faded tattoo concealed beneath his sleeve. Palace gates caught his reflection as he turned, and momentarily, he saw both versions of himself simultaneously: the ceremonial guard maintaining tradition, and the shadow warrior who had once moved through hostile territory under darkness. They weren't contradictory identities but complementary ones, different expressions of the same fundamental commitment to service. Late evening tourists paused for photographs, cameras clicking in gathering darkness. Harrow remained motionless, a living statue representing centuries of military tradition. But behind ceremonial stillness, his mind stayed active, alert to surroundings with the same professional awareness that had preserved his life in the world's most dangerous locations. The tourists departed, and Harrow resumed his measured patrol along designated routes. Palace grounds were peaceful now, quiet in ways that permitted deeper reflection. He considered choices that had brought him here, paths taken and abandoned, that had shaped both his career and his fundamental identity as a professional soldier. His phone buzzed with a new message from Bennett, characteristically brief and professional. Annual joint training exercise planned for spring. Your expertise in ceremonial protocols would be valuable for diplomatic aspects. Interested? The invitation was carefully worded, offering participation without requiring return to operational status. Harrow pondered the message as he completed his circuit of palace grounds. It represented a way to bridge his two worlds, contributing his unique combination of operational experience and ceremonial expertise to a new generation of warriors. The opportunity appealed to him, offering chances to mentor others while remaining true to current commitments. His response was equally measured: send details, tentatively interested pending official approval. It was the kind of diplomatic reply that preserved options while maintaining appropriate boundaries. The world of special operations would always be part of him, but no longer define the entirety of his service commitment. The night shift passed quietly, marked by regular rhythms of ceremonial duty. When dawn broke over London, Harrow was relieved by morning guards, his duties completed with the same precision that characterized every aspect of his military career. The transition from night to day marked another cycle in endless routines that had become his new normal. In his quarters, Harrow carefully hung his ceremonial uniform, scarlet wool remaining pristine despite night duties. The routine of preparation and maintenance was as much part of his service now as weapons cleaning had been during operational days. Different tools, different purposes, but identical underlying commitment to professional excellence. The faded tattoo caught his attention in the mirror as he changed clothes, reminder of journeys taken and battles fought in places that would never appear in official histories. It marked membership in an exclusive brotherhood, but no longer served as the defining symbol of his identity. He had evolved beyond narrow confines of any single role, becoming something more complex and nuanced. A knock interrupted his thoughts. One of the junior guards stood at attention, seeking guidance on procedural matters that had arisen during morning preparations. Harrow provided needed instruction with patient professionalism, understanding that his role now included mentorship alongside ceremonial responsibilities. The interaction reminded him of something crucial: how knowledge and experience passed from one generation of warriors to the next, regardless of their specific service nature. Whether in special operations or ceremonial units, military institutions function through transmission of expertise from veterans to newcomers. The endless cycle of learning and teaching that maintained institutional knowledge. As weeks became months, Harrow found himself increasingly involved in training and mentorship activities. His unique background made him valuable in ways traditional ceremonial guards could not be, able to draw from depth of experience encompassing both operational and traditional service requirements, the joint training exercise Bennett had proposed eventually materialized, bringing together ceremonial units and special operations forces from both nations. Harrow found himself in the unusual position of serving as a bridge between very different military worlds, translating diplomatic protocol requirements for operators more comfortable with direct action. The exercise proved successful, demonstrating that skills required for ceremonial duties, precision, attention to detail, ability to perform under observation weren't fundamentally different from those needed in special operations. The revelation surprised many participating operators, who had previously dismissed ceremonial service as lacking genuine military value. For Harrow, the exercise provided validation of his career choices and confirmation that his current role was no less meaningful than his previous one. He had discovered a way to serve that honored both his operational past and ceremonial present, bridging worlds that had once seemed completely incompatible. The final evening brought an informal gathering of all participants, opportunity for warriors from different specialties to share experiences and perspectives. Harrow found himself surrounded by operators eager to hear stories from his classified past, but he deflected most questions with practiced ease of someone accustomed to maintaining operational security. Instead, he spoke about military service, evolution, different ways warriors could serve their countries throughout their careers. He discussed tradition and ceremony's importance in maintaining institutional memory, the role of visible military presence in reassuring civilian populations, and skills that transferred between operational and ceremonial roles. The audience listened with unexpected interest, many beginning to understand for the first time that ceremonial service wasn't a dead-end assignment but a different expression of the same professional values they held dear. Some even began considering how their own careers might evolve as they aged out of direct operational roles. As evening concluded, Bennett approached Harrow for private conversation. They walked outside, away from crowded facilities, finding quiet spots where they could speak freely. Night air was cool, filled with sounds of normal life continuing around the military base. "You found your place," Bennett observed, his tone carrying approval and perhaps slight envy. "We all find our place eventually," Harrow replied. "The challenge is recognizing it when we do." They stood in comfortable silence, two warriors who had shared experiences that would never be fully understood by those who hadn't lived them. The bond between them remained strong, but was no longer defined by shared operational past. It had evolved into something more mature, mutual respect for different paths they had chosen. "The offer remains open," Bennett said finally. "If you ever decide you want to return to operational service." Harrow nodded, understanding the door would always be available if he chose to walk through it, but he also knew he wouldn't be taking that option. He had found something in his current role that satisfied him in ways operational service no longer could, a different kind of purpose that suited this stage of his career perfectly. The return to London and normal duties felt like coming home after an extended journey. Familiar routines of palace guard duty, precisely choreographed movements of ceremonial service, respectful distance maintained with tourists and dignitaries, all of it had become as natural to him as breathing. But there were changes too, subtle shifts reflecting his growing understanding of his role and its importance. He began seeing connections between precision required for ceremonial duties and skills that had served him in special operations, attention to detail, ability to perform flawlessly under pressure, importance of teamwork and trust. These were universal military values that transcended specific roles. His reputation within the ceremonial community grew, built on foundations of professional excellence and leadership that drew from his entire military experience. Junior guards sought his guidance not just on procedural matters, but on broader questions of military service and career development. He found himself becoming a mentor in ways he had never anticipated, helping others navigate their own journeys through military life. The palace itself seemed different to him now, not just a historic building requiring protection, but a symbol of continuity and tradition that connected past and present. Standing guard at its gates, he was part of something larger than himself, a living link in chains of service that stretched back centuries and would continue long after his own career ended. Years passed, marked by changing seasons and endless cycles of ceremonial duties. Harrow's position evolved with his experience, eventually leading to promotion and increased responsibilities within the ceremonial structure. The faded tattoo on his arm became even fainter with time, but memories it represented remained sharp and clear. New challenges rose: state visits, requiring special protocols, security concerns that drew on his operational background, training requirements that needed adaptation for changing times. Each challenge was met with the same professional competence that had characterized his entire military career, regardless of specific service nature. Joint exercises with Allied Special Operations Forces became regular occurrences, with Harrow serving as key liaison between ceremonial and operational communities. His unique background made him invaluable in bridging gaps between very different military cultures, helping each side understand the value and importance of the other's mission. Younger guards under his supervision began showing influence of his mentorship, displaying levels of professional awareness and adaptability that went beyond traditional ceremonial training. They understood their role was part of larger military tradition, connected to but distinct from operational forces that garnered more public attention. Tourists who came to photograph the changing of the guard never knew they were witnessing results of decades of military evolution, the blending of traditions stretching back centuries with modern professional standards. They saw pageantry and precision, but missed deeper currents of service and sacrifice that flowed beneath the surface. As evening settled over London once again, Harrow stood at his post outside Buckingham Palace, his scarlet uniform a beacon of tradition in gathering darkness. In his pocket, his phone contained messages from former teammates scattered around the world, men and women who had chosen different paths but remained connected by shared experiences and mutual respect. The reflection in palace gates showed a mature professional who had successfully navigated transition from shadow warrior to ceremonial guardian, finding meaning and purpose in both roles. The journey had not been easy, but it had led to a kind of peace that operational service had never provided. In the distance, London's lights stretched toward the horizon, millions of people going about their daily lives in security provided by warriors they would never meet. Some of those warriors operated in shadows, conducting missions that would never be acknowledged. Others stood in public view, maintaining traditions that connected present to past. Both forms of service were necessary, both were honorable, and both required the same fundamental commitment to something larger than personal glory or recognition. Harrow had learned to find satisfaction in knowing he had served well in multiple capacities, adapting to changing requirements while maintaining core values that defined him as a professional soldier. The night deepened, and his shift continued, another page in the endless story of military service that connected individual sacrifice to national purpose. The faded tattoo beneath his ceremonial sleeve bore witness to journeys taken and battles fought, but no longer defined the boundaries of his service. He was, in the end, exactly what he had always been: a warrior who served his country with distinction, regardless of uniform worn or specific nature of duties assigned. The methods had changed, but the commitment remained constant, a steady flame that would burn as long as duty called and honor demanded response.